You're now live on YouTube.
All right. All right, everybody. Let me get my presentation going here. If it goes, there we go. Screen 2.
Yeah, when he's Martin Luther King and stuff.
All right, everybody see the screen? Good, great, because you can't unmute now. So my name's Tom Stallings. I have been in the Christmas world for about 3 years now. And just a little bit about me. Well, tonight's class is about networking basics. So this is going to be kind of we're going to stay basic, but we're also going to go a little technical. So just to warn you, I do tend to jump back and forth. So please save your questions for the end if you don't mind, and I may ask some questions during it. We'll just see how it's going. So I'll try to keep it basic, but unfortunately, this is just one of those topics that turns into very technical very quick. I'll try to dummy it down as best I can, and sometimes other people can explain it a little bit better, and vice versa. So a little bit about me. Why is my slide not changing? There we go. I own and operate 3 businesses. 2 are IT. 1 is Medicaid, which actually just my wife runs. I've been in the switching and routing scene for over 15 years. I do have my master's in IT. Typical networking guy. You got all your certifications, so MCSE, CCSA, yada, yada, yada. I don't really update them anymore, so I have them, but I've let them pretty much all expire because they just cost so much money to renew. So troubleshooting is one of my expertise. One of the things that our company is known for is to come in and fix things that most corporate IT people do not figure out. We also design and build major networks, resorts. We built some data centers, Chicago, Seattle, things like that. I am an engineer by heart, so some of the things we're going to discuss tonight, if you are a true networking engineer, you may just want to jump off because there's going to be some things that I go over tonight that work very well in the Christmas world, and they do work from a technical perspective. But in a corporate or professional network, you would never do it in a million years. So, and I'll go over that once we get to it. And that's more about split networking. So a couple of things we're going to go over tonight. IP addressing, DHCP, what's a broadcast domain, some of the hardware, what's unicast versus multicast, what is a network? Do you really need a show network? Can I operate 2 networks from 1 network? And then I'll go over a couple of network setups and examples and why they work and they don't work. And, of course, we'll do some tricks of the trade. And then we'll get into a little bit of layer 2 and layer 3. And that'll make more sense when we start talking about a split network. So let's talk about IP addresses. Every device on your network in your house or your home or your office or anywhere you go has an IP address. It depends on which one you have. So you're either going to have a public IP address, which is more than likely not, because they're running out of IP addresses. That's why you hear about IPv6. And then you have private IP addresses. So typical home network is set up with a router that hooks into your provider, whether that be Bright House or Cox Network or any of the big providers out there. They will give you one public IP address. From that public IP address that's given to your router, everything below is a private IP address. So typically, everybody's home networks is 192.168.1.1. Sure, who is not muted here? There we go. 1.1, or depending on the router, it may be 0.1 or some that are 254.1. And that's a Class C network. And basically, the Class C if I can present here or annotate, I gotta find my, there we go. Why is my annotate not working? Okay. So a class C, basically what this means is if you've ever called in to tech support and they've said, have you checked your subnet? Is it 255.255.255.0? And I'll slide this over. So what they're saying here is this is a class C network. It's the third octet in this whole string. Anytime you have a router, so 192.168.1.0, it's always going to be associated with 255.255.255.0. That's not always the case when we get into subnetting, but that's a totally different topic. Same thing with a class B. So class B, it actually goes off of this number, and then class A goes off of that number. So we'll go ahead and clear that out. So what does that mean? When you have a class A and you're 255.255.255.0, which is pretty much every standard network out there, you basically get from IP 1 to 254. 1.1 is usually your router. .255, which would be the broadcast, and .254 would be your actual last usable IP. So you basically get, if you do the math, 256 IPs minus 2, you get 254 usable IPs. Class B, you actually get way more, and I'm not even going to go into the math of that one. If you want to know, we can go into it later. But you get way more than that. Class A, you get way more than that. Now, can you turn a Class C network into a Class B? Absolutely. Can you turn a Class B into a Class A? Absolutely. Can you turn an A into a Class C? Absolutely. As long as it falls in these ranges that you see here on the left, you can absolutely use it. You can also do what's called subnetting. So if I did subnetting, you can actually borrow IP addresses from other subnets as well to give yourself more. Or if you're doing routing, you can give yourself way less. So like 255, 255, 255, 248. We can give yourself less IPs, which is typically what you do on the WAN side. Anyway, so from your router down to your network, you're basically a Class C network for most everybody here. What happens is your computer will connect to your router and say, hey, I'm not looking for anybody on my network. I'm looking for Google. And if you've never heard of DNS, DNS is basically how it looks up IP addresses. All right, so if you did ping google.com, you can see it comes up with a number, 216.58.192.46. Believe it or not, if you were to, crap, I keep losing my screens here. Let me bring that network back up there. Let's see, 216.58.192.46. So if you were to open up a browser and go to 216.58.192.46, that's actually Google, and you see how it changes it. So don't believe me, you can do something else. So let's do X sites that went offline last night. Oops. Oh, that's probably it's because it's behind a shared host. So anyway, so that's how routers go out and talk with the world. So they have routing tables, and they basically do the resolution to say, hey, what's Google? It's this IP. Then it goes out and routes, goes to your ISP, goes through the fiber backbone that goes all the way around in the lambda rail, and comes back to you, and it happens in nanoseconds. So it's pretty amazing on how networking works. But anyway, we're getting too detailed. So really, when you're designing your show network, you got to make the choice early. You could change it later. I mean, it's no problem changing it, but you want to make the decision. Do you want to run your own show network, or do you want to run a separate network? Back in the day, 5 years ago, it was pretty much you had to run a separate show network because a lot of the controllers and devices did not support what's called Unicast. So Unicast is actually just an IP address. Multicast is where so if you were looking at a Unicast environment and we're in a meeting like we are right now, and I'm looking for, let's see, Brian McVeigh, and his IP address, so to speak, is 1009, which is his meeting ID, I would say, hey, Brian. And he responds back to me, says, hey, Tom. Nobody else hears that. Multicast, if I say, basically, I'm just saying, hey, and everybody in this room says, hey, back. That's basically multicast of how that works. It comes back. There is a way to separate multicast and stuff like that, but that's a little bit more advanced. But just keep in mind that multicast, it goes across everywhere. Unicast goes directly for the specific device. So what are some common things of your network? Common things at your home right now that everybody has. Well, hopefully don't have one of these, but so I still have one, but everybody's got a router. Everybody's got a switch, and some people still have hubs. So router is what routes the packets, so it forwards it from one LAN to another. The switch is like a hub, but it's a little bit smarter, so it knows MAC addresses. That's important for later when we go over that. And it's also better performance. A hub, basically what comes in one port goes out the other ports and can really create some havoc, and they typically are slower, usually on your 100 megs. Switches, you can get them in 10 gig. You can get them in 100 gig. Most what you're going to use for your show is just a gig. A lot of the big questions I get every year is, well, why don't I just buy this 100 meg switch from this garage sale for $4? Well, 100 megs nice and all that kind of stuff, but why not go ahead and get the gig, for the extra $5 and just be done with it? There's really no reason to not have anything that's not gig in today's world. So in my opinion, if you got some old 100 meg ones out there, even though the Falcons only support 100 meg and a couple other controllers only support 100 meg, you might as well just make it a gig and just keep it easy. Some of the other things that you can put in here is definitely upgraded devices. So for me at my house, I run a unified network, which is Ubiquity Networks, which is a consumer-based networking system for the home that you can use commercially. I've used it in smaller offices and some mid-sized offices, and then when you get into the big guys like the Ciscos and Junipers and stuff like that, then you're looking at quite a few $1,000s per device. So obviously, the more name brand, the bigger, the more you're going to pay for it, the less, vice versa. So let's talk about Unicast and multicast now that we got into that conversation. So as I was saying, when Unicast is, it basically is, when it relates to X-Lights, is, let's say you're running X scheduler and it forms its packet. We'll just keep it as a packet. We won't go into how. It forms its packet, and it tags its IP address of 192.168.1.204, which is a controller. It's going to know how to get there and basically send that packet just to that device. So what does that mean? It's obviously liked by everybody because you know where everything's going. It reduces your network traffic. It reduces your traffic on Wi-Fi. A lot of people are running shows on Wi-Fi. We'll get into that conversation later as well. I do not run Wi-Fi, even though I design Wi-Fi networks. And then there's some software that doesn't support multicast. So there's some controllers now that you have to put an IP address in. Multicast is easier to set up. You basically just set up the universe, and it doesn't care what the IP address is. So you don't have to program anything in it. As long as it's on the network, you're good to go. The issues can be that Wi-Fi becomes unusable, because with multicast, it's basically broadcasting it everywhere that it can see. And, you know, with Wi-Fi, with the protocols, it wants to try to reach in things and stuff like that. And it can become basically unusable. Also with multicast, if you have low powered devices, it can eat up a lot of power. So you could see some issues with your actual lights working. What's one of the good things? So one of the good things is for DMX or even universes, you can have multiple controllers with the same setup. So if you got a set of mini trees on the left and a set of mini trees on the right, you could technically put them on the same universe, and both sides would get the same data at the same time, in theory. Would I ever do that? Obviously not, but so let's dive into, and I think my slides got out order here, so I'm gonna go to this one. Here we go. What is a dedicated show network? So the big craze nowadays is I got to have my own show network. I got to have my own show network. And basically what you're doing is you're taking everything that's part of your show and putting it into a package. Whether there's a couple different ways we can go into that. And we will during this class. You keep everything separate. So the advantage is all your traffic show only, Netflix, your wife is happy. She's on her own network, on her own home network. She's happy. Your kids are happy. It is fairly simple to set up. It's easy to manage. Troubleshooting is simple because you're only troubleshooting just your show equipment, and testing is easier because you're not actually going through your home network. On the flip side, even though I said it's easy to set up and easy to manage, it's still confusing to set up. Troubleshoot can be tougher because if your show's going on at night and your router's out in the garage or your switch is out in the garage and you're over at your house and something goes wrong, sometimes if you don't have things set up right, you have to literally get your laptop, run over to the garage, plug into the show network, and start troubleshooting from there. And I don't know about everybody else, but in Florida at 8 o'clock at night is mosquito, craziness. So sometimes you figure out ways to go around that, but it could get pretty not very fun at night if you keep everything outside. Device access is a challenge, although it's much easier with FPP Connect today with what they enrolled out last year. You basically use proxy IPs. I will not get into proxy IPs. If you know how to set it up, that's great. I'm going to go to the old method of how to set that up as far as, or what that looks like as far as static routing. And then, of course, testing from X-Sites can be challenging. If your main computer's inside, it's on a totally different network, and you didn't, VPN over to the other network, or you have nothing tied to it, you're going to run into some issues there. Man, my slides really got messed up. So excuse me for a second. So let's jump into this one. So the OSI model, I'm not going to dig into each one of these. So basically when it comes to networking, you're dealing with 3 layers. Number 1 is your physical. So your cables, your Cat5 cable, any of that is your physical layer. The data link layer, which is layer 2, as we call it, which will be important once we get into the different show networks here shortly. And then a network layer, which is layer 3, which is basically the routing network, which is important for show as well. So there is other protocols that gets done with the packages and how it packages up all the packets. But we won't get into that. That's way too technical, and we could be here for hours just on this slide. So let's talk about a network, right? So here is something that I like to do, and I like to document as much as I can. And this is important, especially when it comes down to running your own show network or a separate network and stuff like that. If you notice here, this is just my pixel counts, right? So this is how my actual layout is. Which way is my data going? How do I hook it all together? Which each name in X lights? How many pixels per? Things like that. Where my connections are, where my controllers are. For as far as data and power, and I do that for everything. It really makes troubleshooting easier. The second thing is I do run multiple businesses, and sometimes I got to go. So if I ever have something go wrong, I can have somebody come in here and look at this folder and say, all right, well, we got to go here and see what it is. You know, my window went out, you know, how is it connected and things like that. So same thing for my yard props. I keep everything, how everything's connected. This year I'm going to add in all of the actual data piece of it, because obviously this has an IP address. This doesn't, and I'm going to tie that all in together so I can really dive into it. This takes a little bit of time to do, obviously. So what does my home network look like? Surprisingly, I run 37,000 pixels. I run multiple servers at my house. That have nothing to do with Christmas. I run a couple of data miners, which have nothing to do with Christmas. I run media servers at my house. And I run quite a few wireless devices. And you're sitting here looking at, well, that's all the same network. Well, yeah. To me, and in my opinion, you do not have to run everything on a separate network. Right now, with everything the way it's spaced, I have all my computers on Netflix. I mean, all my TVs on Netflix. There's 3 or 4 TVs. There's 4 or 5 laptops. We probably got 4 or 5 phones, iPads. I got Wemo devices everywhere. I got 9 cameras that all run HD streaming. All of that runs across my network, and it never, ever interferes with my network, ever. So you're asking, well, how are you doing that? So I'm doing what's called a split. I guess you want to call it a split network, but I'm splitting it physically. So if you've never seen my layout, I guess I should show you my layout because it won't make sense to you. All right. So I have 2 buildings on my property. This is my office and 2 car garage. There's an office up here, and I'm actually in this office right behind this matrix. From my garage to the house is via fiber, and then the house is where the internet connection is. So that sits up over here somewhere. What I mean by separating the network is, gotta get this other, there we go. I just split network. So basically I run everything in a flat network. So my router sits up here, comes down into here, and then this comes across. So when we look at this picture, here's my router. Here is my switch that sits up over in the house. That comes across into my Unify switch. And this goes to my upstairs Unify switch because there's 2 offices. And then this goes to my switch outside. So physically, what happens is, and my X scheduler actually sits up in this rack, which is upstairs. So everything physically is basically sitting off of this switch. So anything from here down is all show. So even though my computers sit all over the place here, all over the place here, everything is still, from a show perspective, is all right here. So it comes into this Unify gateway and goes straight out to the outside switch. And as you can see with my house, I obviously could have just ran a 30-foot Cat5 cable from here to my F48 that sits over here that runs all of this. But the problem with that is now that's coming into this switch, which then comes into the fiber, and then it comes through all my office and servers and all that kind of stuff, then upstairs, and into the show computer, which is okay because everything's gig, everything's fiber, would probably be okay. But I decided not to do that. So what I did is everything comes out to this switch. So anything outside gets connected back to this switch. So my F48 that sits over my house, I run a 150-foot Cat5 cable that runs to this switch, and then everything goes here. So everything is just basically in this circle when it comes to running the network. Now, why is that important? Switches, most switches are layer 2. So your Netgear switch, your Linksys switch are layer 2. If you didn't know, there's 2 ways that a device knows you. One by IP address. One by IP address. And one by MAC address. So you can see here, this is everything that's on my network right now. Switches learn by MAC addresses. Routers learn by IP addresses. So basically right here. Are there some switches that can know IP addresses? Absolutely. They're layer 3 switches. We're not going to get into that conversation. It's something totally different. So basically your standard D-Link or your standard Netgear router or anything like that, or switch, I'm sorry, knows everything by MAC address. The advantage to that is if this was a Netgear switch right here, and we're going to say it is, and if I wanted to move my Xschedule computer to this switch, when it sends out the packet, it's only going to hit this switch and only going to go straight out, right? It doesn't have to come back to here, and it definitely doesn't have to go back to my router because it doesn't care. It only knows by MAC address and IP address that it's right off the same switch. That makes sense. A lot of people get lost in this part, so I'm sorry if you do. So let's go back to.
So will that setup feed the Falcon that was in the upper left-hand corner?
Falcon in upper left corner. Yeah, but you can see that so my Falcon comes back to this switch. I could save myself a lot of time and just run it to this switch, but then I have my show computer coming through all this. There's a lot more devices on here than I'm showing in this picture. I just had to keep I had to keep it simple. There's a lot of devices that come through that. So I chose to bring it back here so that it keeps everything in its own domain, as you call it. We go back to here. This is where it gets a little tricky. So one of the questions I get asked all the time, can you run 2 networks on one network? When you think about the switches, and they only need to know a MAC address, can you run 2 networks on a single network? The actual answer is yes. From a professional standpoint and from a corporate standpoint, absolutely not. You should never do it. You're going to run into issues at some point, and it's unsecure and stuff like that. So there's 2 ways that you can do this. As you can see in this diagram, you got 192.168.1.0, and you got 10.10.10.0. My computer, if I were to add a USB to Ethernet, I could create its own dedicated IP address of 10.10.10.1. Excuse me, I would probably make that 10.10.2. So this would be 10.10.2. This would plug into this switch, which is not a special switch. This is a Linksys. And then that goes from inside my garage to my outside. Because it knows MAC addresses, it's going to know that this whole network with these MAC addresses from all these devices come to this switch. So it's going to know to go directly here. Now, You could also bypass a switch and just take it directly to the PC. And then basically anything from your show or your X schedule will come out through here and go into the switch, and you're technically running a separate network over here on the right. All right, let's put that back. All right, so that's kind of the split network. Other popular decision right here. This is probably the most popular. This is the, you got your home network, you got FPP, you put your FPP on wireless, and then the Ethernet cable runs out and runs your show as the master. Real simple to do here. So basically, your Wi-Fi is connected up via DHCP. I would statically assign it. So let's call it 1.50. And then your show network's 10.10.10.0. So all these, all your controllers, all that stuff are 10.10.10. You would basically log into, somehow my X scheduler opened here. There we go. So if you've never seen a Unify access point or controller, this is basically what it looks like. Here's all my Unify devices. And then, so how do I make this happen? So I'm going to make this network routable. So we're going to pretend that my FPP is sitting out here. And don't shoot the messenger. I do not use FPP as my master. Where is, I always lose it every time. There we go. Under gateway, we can do what's called a static route. So we're going to create a static route. We'll call this FPP show master. And my destination network is the actual entire network. So 10.10.10.0, right? /24, because it's a class C. Distance, we'll just do 10. We'll do next hop, and then it's going to be, because I programmed my FPP on wireless to be 1.50. And you know what? I need to check that real quick. Hold on. All right, so I'm not going to mess up my network, so it'll disconnect me. So you hit done. That's it. So basically, anytime you type in from a computer inside your network, 10.10.10.10 for your F16, it's going to know to go out to 1.50. As long as you went into FPP, and this is not set up that way, as long as you went in FPP, set up your Ethernet and your WLAN, and you got enable routing between network interfaces, it should work. So that is the quickest and easiest way to do it. You can also do static routes on your computer. I don't recommend that. Do it on your router. That way, every device that you want can hit it. You have no idea when you're sitting out there troubleshooting at night or putting your network together. You know, you want to jump on your computer, your phone real quick and turn something on and off. And, you know, that way, if you got it set up in the router piece, every device can get to it. Downside of it is, you know, if you have a funny kid or a funny neighbor that comes over on your network and, you know, they really could mess up your show if they're already on your network and know your Wi-Fi password, and they can be funny guys. So anyway, so I tend to, you know, just put it on the router level and be done with it. Go back to here. So we put in a static route, 192.168.1.50. And we want to be able to see everything on this subnet. So it's going to see everything. And then that is a separate show network on an FPP master set up in about 5 seconds. I know people are going to have questions for that, so we'll get into that a little bit later. Now, you can run a totally separate network. Literally, everything sits in the garage. Nothing connects to it. No internet. You literally have a computer that you cut on the Wi-Fi, you let it sync up to Dropbox, and you grab your files from your home laptop that you're programming on, and then that's it. Perfectly acceptable to do. What's the advantages? Obviously, all of this traffic is not coming across your Wi-Fi. It's not coming across your network. Same stuff there. Somebody keeps breathing. Disadvantages is, again, troubleshooting. You're gonna have to go out there and figure it out and all that kind of stuff. Some people still run it this way. I personally would never run it this way, just because it just sucks to do that at 2 o'clock in the morning. You can also run what's called a VLAN network. So this is pretty popular. This is when you start getting advanced. I do run VLANs at my house, but I do not run them inside the network that you see. So I have a totally separate network. Why would you do a VLAN? So VLAN, you can basically group in all of your product or all of your devices together. So if you really, really want to be secure with security cameras, you put it on its own VLAN, and you program each camera up on its own VLAN so that it's on its own network. Nothing can touch it. Your computer's not able to see it. It makes it more secure, makes traffic a little bit more directional because it knows where the VLANs are. Sorry, somebody just wrote me. I got to cut off my chat. Sorry, hold on. There we go. So what's the advantage of this? You can obviously just run your show off of a complete VLAN. Call it VLAN 10. I will bring back up my controller, I hope. I can come in here. I can create a new network, standard network. We'll call this Christmas network. We'll call that off the LAN 2 port, which I could put it off the same LAN port, but I don't want to mess with my network. So we could do 10.10.10.1/24. Give it a VLAN ID of 10, hit next and save, and that'll go through and create all that. I'm not going to do that because I'm presenting just in case. And I also have that static route, which may mess with it. So I'm going to pull that out too. So what's the advantage of VLAN? So obviously you segment your network even further. Not only are you doing it physically, you're also doing it logically as well. A lot of people do this for LOT devices. So your Wemo smart switches, your I'm drawing a blank. What other devices are out there? Thermostats, your anything like that in your home automation, you could put on its own VLAN and make it not routable. So there's a lot of spoofs that come out with those IoT devices that people can literally, it'll come across your network and kill all of your devices internally. And I haven't heard of anybody that happening to, but I have heard of, people's devices become unusable and they have to, reflash them or even replace them because people, have their lives and like to create stuff to go out and hack stuff. So you can do that with VLANs. You have your camera one, your show network, your server network, all kinds of stuff you can do with VLANs. And then on each switch, you got to obviously have switches that support VLAN so that you can pass them through the trunk. This would be a trunk right here. And then all these switch ports would have to be programmed for VLAN 2, all these for VLAN 1. So it gets a little bit more time consuming to set up because you have to know where each one is at any given point. Let's go back to the presentation here. I gotta get to my slides. One thing I missed, so USB to Ethernet. Doing a USB to Ethernet, what's the advantages? It's convenient, it's cheap, easy to manage. plugs right in your computer. You create a whole separate show network from one computer. One does all your internet, one does all your show stuff. This is if you're going to run Xscheduler or even to an FPP master that can see everything on that network. So it's kind of the cheap, down and dirty version that you could do it. Obviously, most computers are still USB 2.0. So they only support technically 480 megabytes per second. And then obviously the downside is the adapter. You lose the adapter, you lose everything. So that goes into the 2 NICs on one PC, same thing. We already run whatever VLAN. All right. So this is just going over to, this is one of Brian Hensley's slides. This is just going over the same thing. House Wi-Fi router comes over to the FPP master, which is running all your show, which goes down via Ethernet. That gets powered by a micro USB. This is F16, yada, yada, yada. So it kind of just shows that a little bit more in depth. I don't think I missed any slide. All right, so here comes the hard portion of the conversation. Who has questions? And I try to leave as much time here as we can. So we got about 40 minutes of questions.
You guys should be able to unmute yourself now. And Tom, you're scheduled till 8.
No, it's 7:30.
You
So
sure?
30 minute. Yeah, it's a 30-minute downtime until
Till light fight? Okay.
yeah. Nobody has questions. I guess everybody went to sleep. Oh, we can't unmute. Oh, hold on.
I clicked the button. See if you can do it, Tom.
Well,
Allow participants to unmute themselves.
yeah, there we go.
Yeah,
How about now?
we can.
There we go.
Perfect.
Does a network switch wear out, go bad?
I'm sorry. Can you say that again?
Yeah, does a network switch wear out or go bad?
Absolutely. All devices go bad eventually.
All right.
Oh, and speaking on that, it's always good to have a backup. I personally, I mean, I guess because I'm an engineer and work on major networks, I have a backup of everything in my show. I have a backup F16. I got a backup switch. I got a backup FPP. Actually, that FPP you just looked at is my backup FPP that needs updated. Thanks, Chris. I have a backup to everything, so a little bit more expensive, but I believe in it strongly, especially when your show only goes a month long, and you never know. David's usually pretty good at sending stuff out same day, but you never know. I wouldn't want to be down a day or two. So
if you were setting up your network for the first time and you had total free reign of options, what would you recommend?
So are you saying money wise, or are you saying?
No, I'm not saying unlimited funds, but a newbie just getting started, don't want the down and dirty, but don't want the most expensive either. What would you really recommend to get started?
I'm going to get shot here from some people, especially some of the older people. I run 37,000 pixels, somewhere around there, on one network. So I say that you can just run it off your same home network. I've never had an issue with Netflix. I've never had an issue with streaming. I've never had an issue with my video cameras.
Just take a switch out to the garage, more or less, and
Yep.
run off my home network down and dirty. Be done.
Down and dirty. Yep.
Awesome.
That's the way Ken teaches his networking class too. He just says, keep it simple, plug it in your network, be done.
Yep. Plug it in your network, be done. I mean, it's so you get an F16 in, you plug it in, let it get DHCP, program your static, it's done. You know, when you start running separate show networks, you got to have a sheet of what IP addresses you program. More than likely, you're not going to have a device that gives out DHCP on your show network. You know, it's just an extra layer of troubleshooting, and with the advantage, I mean, with the advancements that Keith and you know, switching technology and consumer grade equipment like Ubiquity and Unify coming down into consumer grade level. I mean, I can't give you a number of when I might separate out my network, but at 37,000 pixels, my network doesn't blink. So
Yeah, reasonable. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
You multicast or unicast though, Tom?
I'm Unicast all the way.
Yeah, I'd probably caveat the advice to say that do it the easy way, but to use unicast.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm Unicast all the way, 100%. If there's ever a device that doesn't run Unicast, I won't use it. Is somebody asking a question, or somebody's?
What about things like Wi-Fi extenders or something like that? My show is going to be hosted in the garage, but my router's in the office.
I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm sure Bill Porter's going to have an opinion too. So let me talk about wireless for a minute. Most routers come with wireless capabilities. The first thing that I do is I immediately cut their wireless off. It's just extra computing and things that your home router will do that doesn't need to be done. I go with Unify because it is strictly layer 2 Wi-Fi. So I immediately cut off any. So if I have a Linksys or whatever from my cable provider, I cut that wireless off. I plug in my Unify, and it's all layer 2, so it's a lot stronger, a lot faster, a lot more stable. And extenders, you can use extenders if you're going to use extenders that go via Cat 5 or Cat 6. Absolutely. If you're using one where you're taking wireless to extend your network, I typically don't do that because you're running power. You know, that goes as far as running Wi-Fi your network too. You're running power to that device anyway. Just run a cable. I don't understand the concept of people. Well, I'm going to run Wi-Fi, but I'm not going to run a cable, but I'm still running power to it. I haven't understood some of the people's thinking there, but you know, keep it as simple as you can.
Well, before you cut me off, to kind of finish what I'm thinking.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You know, I can't run a cable out to the garage because the house is a rental.
Right.
And I was saying about going like a Wi-Fi extender that would have a port I could plug into a network box. Right now, I'm only running one controller that's going to use a cable, but I feel myself probably expanding pretty quickly. So yeah, I'm going to eventually need a hub in the garage.
Well, in your case, I think I would go with probably, you're going to run FPP as your master?
Not this year.
So you're going to run, computer's going to run X schedule or LOR?
Yeah, I'm going to have a PC running X schedule.
Okay.
The Wi-Fi signal gets okay out to the garage, but beyond that, it doesn't.
But what's running your show is going to be hardwired to a switch, right?
Right.
So really, the only thing you need Wi-Fi for is to grab a file or just have internet just in case you need it on the laptop, right?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. So in that case, I mean, I wouldn't worry about an extender. You could, I mean, you could run an extender or run one of those power extenders, which goes through your breaker box. But disclaimer, sometimes those things stop working and you got to reboot them. So they work great to give you a landline out in your garage that goes through your circuit breaker box. And actually, Home Depot has them, and I've used them in certain circumstances, and they work great. But yeah, I don't see a reason why you would even need an extender in your case.
Okay, thank you.
I guess my opinion would be Wi-Fi should be avoided until needed. Is there no way you could run an Ethernet cable under a door temporarily, anything like that? That'd be my first suggestion. And then I think what Tom was alluding to is maybe you don't even need to connect it at all. Just leave your show network as a disconnected network, self-contained out in your yard. And you don't need internet to run a show. The only times you need internet to run a show is just if it's an FPP that doesn't have an RTC to grab the time. Other than that, there's no need to ever have your show network on the internet than other for convenience for you to be able to get into your controllers and make changes.
Right.
Right.
I am thinking about a couple wireless controllers for a couple of areas that it would be inconvenient to run a cable to.
I used to do a lot of wireless controllers. I actually helped develop some of the software early on, but haven't done much since then for the wireless controllers that are out there. I try not to use wireless unless I have to. It's just something else to go wrong.
Yeah, I only have one area where, it'd be, maybe 2 wireless controllers, just because of the location of the connection to the lights.
Yeah, sure.
I'm 100% wireless. I have
Jim,
no
you're
I
an
have no
exception.
data cables in my yard.
You're an exception, Jim.
It runs great too.
But but there's a difference though. You're not running everything in wireless in bridge mode.
No, I'm running master remote. And
Right.
I listen to multicast versus unicast. Doesn't really make any difference for master remote either.
Right. Because you're running all yours in remote mode. The only thing your wireless is doing is just doing the sync packet. That's a big difference.
Right.
That's a good use of wireless. Everything else is terrible.
Yeah. Let's see. Somebody asked the question, should I run controller to controller or each controller individually? So my opinion, I would never go through a controller to controller. I know Dave, the Falcons have 2 ports. I would never go that way because if that Falcon goes bad, then your next one is going to be bad. So, and then only on top of that, they're only 100 meg ports. So
your core switch could go bad and your whole show goes out. It's the same theory.
True. It's the same thing. I guess it's just more personal preference, as you call it.
Yeah. Capability wise, it works great. It's easier to wire that way.
Yep. Who else has questions that I miss? Do you have a BB that is Wi-Fi, a BeagleBone? No, I don't, but I heard people use them.
Get any of those Wi-Fi 6 beta access points to play with? I got one right here.
Sweet. Can you send it to me?
No, I'm playing with it. Look at that. You'd be jealous. Beta sticker. Unify 6.
Nice.
I'm actually not impressed.
Really?
Yeah. So far, it's the same performance as the Nano HD, but cheaper. So I guess it's cheaper. It's the same as the Nano HD, but cheaper. But other than that, I don't see the promised speeds for Wi-Fi 6.
Yep. I guess I can stop sharing. Or no, I can't. I should have went to this one.
You don't have any of those Gen 2 switches that you use in your diagram, do you? You all Gen 1?
Yeah, it's all Gen 1.
I want to play around with that VR thing though. It looks cool. Have you seen that?
I think I've seen that. Yeah. Do you use UNMS?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm liking that.
Routers. I don't touch Unify routers. I hate Unify routers. Everything else is great, but I have Edge routers, so I use UMNS to watch the Edge routers.
Don't you wish they would just put them both together?
I don't know.
I haven't understood that.
So if you're recommending not to link from controller to controller, what switch or would you recommend then to link all your controllers up to? Is there a really good one out there?
There's really not. I mean, as long as it's gig, I mean, there's really no point to not go gig, even though the controllers are only 100 megs for most of them. Again, like Bill said, it's the same reason. I mean, your switch could go bad. But to my point is a $30 switch versus having to keep a secondary $200 controller would be my argument.
You
but,
already keep one of those in case one of your controllers
well,
goes
I
bad,
do,
though.
but most people don't.
Come on, Tom. I'm going to beat you up for this. It'll
I
work.
know, I know.
Daisy chain to your life's content. We all have to sit there and watch our shows and fix problems anyway.
Yeah.
So you said a switch is a switch. I was given a gigabit switch 4-port, probably retails for like $10. And you're saying it's just as good as something I would pay $50, $60 for?
Depending on the brand.
For our purposes, yes.
For your purposes, yes.
Okay.
Now, that $10 switch can go up against a Cisco. For our purposes, yes. For what most people use a Cisco for, absolutely not.
Now be careful because they have that $20 Unify switch now. Have you seen those?
I have seen those, yeah.
I actually bought 2 of those too. They're very nice.
Yep. You know, I bought their stock when they came out, just so you know, Bill.
Oh, I'm jealous
Yep.
of you then.
I love Ubiquity.
I saw it like 5 months too late.
Yep. I bought it at like $63, I think.
Jeez.
Any other questions before? Nope, somebody's got a question.
There's, when running Pi as a bridge between your home network and your show network, does it provide internet access for the boards attached to your show network? That's a complicated answer. I don't. Does it? Will it do the gateway? Does it do a DHCP and a gateway to all the other devices? Anyone know?
When you're running a Pi as a bridge. No, it does not.
Okay, so the answer is no. All's bridge. It can do static routing. Yeah, but I guess you have to set up your gateways properly in the devices.
Yep. I run a router too.
Was any type of pole or pole-like structure, because a lot of people use crosses, if you use them like major way.
No, nothing special.
Nope.
I'm gonna say it's
Yeah, Mark, I agree with you. The Pi is the gateway. I just don't know if it serves out IP addresses with the gateway properly configured and then static routes it correctly. I've never played with it. Maybe it does, but the answer is yes.
You drive those in with those little green fence posts or something like that.
It has to be all static, I guess is what you're saying, Mark.
You start getting into 8, 10, 12 feet.
Okay. Yeah, if you set it up statically, you could do it, but it doesn't do it easily.
That's a little harder to get a ladder to get to the top of it. You get anything into the 16, 20-foot range, then
The answer is yes, but it takes a lot of configuring, is what Mark's telling us.
Yeah, by the time you do all that, you might as well just did it a different way.
Yeah. Did you guys already do the raffle? Did I miss that?
No, that's next. I was just seeing if there's any other questions.
Oh,
Everybody
geez,
just...
you do go all the way to 7:30 in the schedule.
You know, they asked me how long, and I said it may go over a little bit an hour, so they gave me an extra 30 minutes.
Jeez.
Because everybody always asks 1,000 questions usually.
I'm looking for a USB network adapter for the Pocket Scroller V2BB. Get any cheap one off Amazon. It'll probably work.
Yep.
Is there a better Ethernet to USB device for the Pocket Beagle? I don't know. I mean, if you really want advice on which one to get, I would just Google, USB adapter for a Beagle and see what kind of results you get for advice.
Most of the Yeti Maxes will work fine with it.
Oh, Chris, you're not allowed to talk, sir. I'm sorry.
What'd you say? What'd you say, Tom?
I said you're not allowed to talk, sir. Sorry.
Oh, okay. we are gonna have a talk though, there, Tom.
I know my FPP is like 10 light years behind, but it's my backup. So it's my backup.
I will say FPP's gotten much better. You should.
Oh yeah,
it's nice.
Yeah, and the FPP proxy. I mean, the whole proxy thing it does now is so much easier.
I'm actually debating violating my golden rule and switching out some of my Falcons for these Beagle boards now.
I want that in writing, Bill.
My rule used to be no software allowed in my grass, but now I'm thinking I'm gonna violate that.
All right, so I use a computer to connect to the Pi wirelessly and have it connected. a switch along my controllers.
No, you don't need a switch just for the sake of having a switch.
No.
If you're cascading your controllers, that's fine. Just leave it that way. You don't need a switch unless you actually need a switch to be able to branch out multiple network cords for any reason.
Any other questions before our lovely host Tony? Oh wait, how did I turn into a host? How did I turn into a host? Where's Bigda?
He was like, "Peace out." Have you seen some of the new stuff coming out? Some of this looks crazy.
Brian McVeigh. Brian McVeigh. I didn't do the numbers for the drawing.
Oh,
That should have been Tony.
well, he may look at the clock and think he doesn't have to come back for another 15 minutes.
No, he's not even in here. Like somehow I'm host.
Did you see the $250 gigabit or a 10G switch they just announced?
No. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. Look at here. Oh wait, can I share my screen? No, I can't share. My
Oh
screen.
yeah, let me stop sharing.
I don't think I'm allowed to. They get to allow me or make me host.
You can now.
No, I can't. Disabled participant screen sharing.
Here, I'll make you co-host.
Since we're all being geeks about networks anyway.
All right, let me stop the live real quick.
Oh yeah, we don't need that.